All right, guys, so we are going to cover Ecdysozoans in this video. These are going to be nematodes, is who we're going to start off with. Our nematodes. Sorry. Oh, goodness, I think I have to yawn in every single video, at least once. Sorry. Okay, so nematodes are roundworms. We said in previous videos we have platyhelminthes, the flatworms. We had Annelida, the segmented worms, and now we have the round worms, nematodes, nematoda. And so these guys are everywhere. They're everywhere. We're going to find them everywhere. Mountains, streams, all over the place. Nematodes, one of the most abundant animals. We're going to get into insects later. But this guy, one of the most abundant. They are, again, everywhere. At least 500 million. At least 500,000, but probably way more than that. And again, we find these guys everywhere. Mountains, hills, lakes, rivers, they are everywhere. And they're small. We don't really notice them typically, but we will go into the ones that are parasites that we do. So most of these guys, small. Most of the time you're not seeing them with your naked eye, but they are there. They are a critical part of the ecosystem. We need these guys. They're important. Lots of them. Again, if like it says right here, if you scooped up, a square meter of topsoil, you're going to have more nematodes in that little square meter of topsoil than all of the people on all of Earth. That's how many nematodes are out there. They're everywhere. Again, most of these are small, but some of these can get bigger than 3 feet. So why do we call them roundworms? They are round and they are wiggly. They are going to have this cuticle that is going to protect them from their outside environment. It's going to help maintain hydrostatic pressure. So what is inside stays inside and what is outside stays outside. So they are going to have a cuticle. Another thing that defines these guys as roundworms, the outer cuticle, and they're going to have muscle that's going to run through this stuff. So we have, in here, we have muscle layer on the mesoderm, and that muscle is going to run in just one direction. We have skeletal muscle that runs in all different directions, so we can move our body in lots of different ways. These guys, their musculature only moves in longitudinal directions. So when they contract their muscles, they're doing that Shaq GIF where he's shaking his shoulders. That's what they're doing. Hopefully I can get this to work for us on our video. Maybe. Cool. Okay. I'm hoping that this is recording and you can see this action. These are vinegar eels. In past years, I've ordered some of these and you can see them under the dissecting microscope, under a light microscope. You can see these guys in action, but they wiggle because of that longitudinal muscle that they've got in there. It only, contracts in one way. And so when it does, it makes them shimmy like that. They have these little wiggly movements. So this is what these look like. These are vinegar eels. They are a nematode. They are a roundworm. Go back to PowerPoint. There we go. So that wiggly, again, the wiggly movement. Here is vinegar eels. And this C. elegans is going to be one of our model organisms. What do you want to talk about with a model organism? A model organism is going to be an organism that we have mapped out all of its genes. We know all the genome in there, what the genes are. We can play around with them and turn them off and turn them on. So it is a model organism. We know, again, it has 19,000 different genes. We know them, and it has helped us being able to determine what they are and being able to block them or express them, turn them on, helps us learn lots of different things, like things about the nervous system and development, because we can track these guys, from initial zygote as it goes through multiple stages of cleavage, 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 and as this little embryo is developing, we can track all of that. What genes are getting turned on and what's not getting turned on while it's developing into its larval form. It's really cool stuff. So we know all of this about this that makes it a model organism when we learned all about how these genes work and how it turns things on and off. And so we learned about Hock genes with these. So I'm a big fan of music. I like kind of all kinds of music. And so I am a sucker for a good parody. And this is a couple years old. I will say it is a couple years old, but it does kind of go into the whole gene expression and body plans, because those Hox genes will turn on your body plan. Arms, you're going to have 2 arms and they're going to grow here, and you're going to have 2 legs and they're going to grow there, and your head is going to sprout from this portion of your body. Those are Hox genes. And so this little video of a parody explains that and how this is developed, in part that we learned because of model organisms like this guy, C. elegans, the little vinegar eel. We know lots about them. How do they eat? We have, well, before we were talking about our planarians, they had a mouth, right? And they had this pharynx and it kind of protruded out of their middle. It was kind of weird looking. These guys are also going to have a mouth and a pharynx, and their pharynx can be used to suck the food towards their mouth. Lots of these guys are free living, but some are going to be parasitic. But again, they're going to use their pharynx. They're going to have a pretty small little intestine in there. If we're talking about the parasites, this should look familiar because we just did our annelids when we talked about leeches, and leeches have similar mouth parts. So these parasitic nematodes are going to have these cutting mouth parts. They're going to have these little sharp teeth kind of extensions that come out that cut into their prey. And then they have anticoagulants, and those things again are going to help you bleed. And so you don't know that this is going on. Usually it's a little numbing as well as anticoagulants. So it will numb the area. You won't know that it's getting bit. And then the blood will free flow with anticoagulants instead of clotting up like your body is supposed to be doing. So these guys have this, and that's what the parasitic ones are doing. They have a very primitive, fairly non-existent circulatory system. Before we were talking about circulatory systems as open or closed. Not so much with these guys. They're pretty much non-existent. They're pretty much absent. Respiratory. So circulatory, does it have open or closed? Does it have arteries or veins? Pretty much nada on circulatory systems. Gonna just have this stuff diffuse across. Respiratory system, same thing. Gases will diffuse across the tissues and you know where they need to be. CO2 out, oxygen in. Speaking of CO2 and oxygen though, a lot of these guys can be anaerobic. So we are aerobic. When we undergo cellular respiration, we are going to use oxygen as our final electron receptor, and that's going to be part of cellular respiration. Before we use that though, we had anaerobic organisms. They were the first forms of life for prokaryotes, and those prokaryotes were anaerobic. So some of these guys are anaerobic. They don't even need oxygen in their metabolism. So it's really primitive, basic form, but it works because the prokaryotes have been doing it for billions of years. Reproduction. These are going to have different sexes, so they're going to have males and females. We can see here on this Ascaris, the males, possible lab practical question. Males have the hook end that you can see here, and the females do not on Ascaris genus. And we said that these guys are nematodes. They have a cuticle, and it helps them with their hydrostatic pressure. So this comes into play when these guys reproduce. So they're going to have internal fertilization. So the sperm is going to meet up with the egg inside of the organism. That's internal fertilization. They don't need flagellated sperm because the males are going to use that hook to hook into the female, and because everything's under pressure, they will inject the female with the sperm. They don't need flagella. It's just going to go in there and hit up the eggs and fertilize those eggs. Once they are fertilized, they can do something really cool. They can postpone the development of that zygote. So sometimes we'll hear about animals that can wait, through a season. Maybe it's a tough season and they'll hold on to the zygotes. And then when things are better and conditions are better and optimum for growing and development of the organism's offspring, then they will have that offspring grow again. So these guys do that. They're able to postpone the development of their little zygotes. Again, this is Ascaris. Don't forget this picture with the male and female ends. You will see this on the lab practical. What does Ascaris mean to us? Well, these are, hookworms, whipworms. The next two groups, this one and the next group, are going to be found in soil, contaminated soil. So the way this works, again, this one, Ascaris is the most common in humans, not in the United States, though. We're pretty good about this in the United States as far as infecting humans, but you will see these guys still in your pets. So what happens? The eggs are going to be passed in contaminated poop, an infected organism's poop, and then that's going to go out into the dirt. And then somebody ingests the dirt with the poop eggs in it, didn't wash their hands, right? And then ingests these eggs in the poop, in the dirt, in their dirty hands, and it brings it into the body. So it goes in their body, and what happens is you swallow it down, right? It goes to your GI tract, and it's going to go onto your intestines. So in your intestines, now those eggs are going to hatch into larvae. Those larvae are going to leave the intestines, cut their way out, and get into the bloodstream. Once they're in the bloodstream, they're going to circulate around the body, and they end up in one of the places where it's very, very thin, in the lungs. So in the alveolar sacs of the lungs, we said that the lungs' job is to exchange gases over the surface of the alveolar sacs, and the blood vessels are all around those things, so the oxygen can come in and the CO2 can get out. Well, what else gets out of there? These guys, Ascaris larvae, will go to the lungs. They will carve their way through and go into the alveolar sacs, into the lungs. And then, I should have prefaced this whole lecture by saying, don't eat in this lecture. Do not eat. If you're eating now, just stop, because it's going to get even more gross. So, Ascaris, poopy eggs, you bring them in, goes in the intestines. Those eggs are going to hatch, turn into larvae. The larvae is going to cut their way out of the intestines, get into the bloodstream, goes to the bloodstream, ends up at the lungs, cuts through the lungs, gets into the lungs themselves. Your body is designed to cough things up and out of the lungs, to get debris, dust, whatever in your lungs up and out of there. So you cough these baby larval Ascaris worms up and out of the lungs, and then you swallow them back down. And now they are going to develop as adults. So now here we are, we have matured back in the intestine. Those things are going to release the eggs and the sperm and unite in putting those guys out. Eggs are going to be passed out in the stool, and the cycle will start again. So this is Ascaris. It has very similar life cycle to other ones in here. We don't really see this much, this prevalent in people so much in the United States, but you do see this in other countries. What does it look like when it's in your intestines? Most of the time you don't know, but sometimes if it's a really bad infection, it can absolutely block up the intestines like it does in this picture here with those adults. You can also have larval migrants where the larvae from an infected animal like these cutie patootie puppies can infect a person by passing. Larval migrants can pass from the infected animal to another host with this adorable, sweet little baby. So you can have larval migrants coming from one species and going to another. Normally doesn't happen, but this adorable photo shoot here is a prime opportunity for larval migrants from the puppies to the adults, to the humans. So we're moving on from Ascaris, and we have hookworms. Both of these guys, Ascaris and hookworms, can be found. Hooks, whips, I'm missing something else. Heartworms can all be found in your pets. And again, Ascaris and hookworms can pass to you. So if you have recently adopted a puppy or any sort of rescue, please be careful with your pet's poop. Both of my dogs are rescues. I've got a rescue Pitty and a rescue Roddy. And when we first had them, one of the first things we did was take them to the vet, right, and get them their vaccinations and also get them dewormer. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for dewormer to kick in, you need to make sure that you are cleaning up the ground where they are pooping. Pick up the poop, because these guys, worms, the hookworms, they can live in soil. And if you are walking around out in your backyard where the dog's going to the bathroom and this dog has hookworms, they can actually burrow through your skin and infect you that way. And then they are similar to Ascaris. They're going to lodge in the intestines and can cause, blockage. They can cause anemia because you got so many parasites in there taking up all the good stuff. And they can also retard physical and mental growth because of this parasitic worm infection. So I love pets, my whole house. I mean, we're animals galore. We got the 2 cats, we got the 2 dogs, but just be careful and knowledgeable now that these pets can pass these to you and you don't want them. So make sure that your pets are vaccinated and have been dewormed so you don't get these things. Trichinella is another type of worm that can be passed. All of these guys are roundworms. It can be passed in uncooked meat, undercooked meat. So we're going to find these in lots of vertebrates, but mostly in pigs. We don't really see this in the United States. Most of our pork goes through CAFOs. If you don't know what a CAFO is, I highly recommend Food Incorporated, Food Inc. documentary. It's old, it's from like 2006, but it's a really good one on all sorts of topics. So most of our pork, again, is coming from CAFOs, and they are treated against these things. But if you may be going to another country, make sure that your pork is cooked, because these guys, we're going to have the adults, they're going to have the larvae. The larvae is going to it's going to spread. And when it spreads, it can get into the skeletal muscle. And so when it does that, it's called trichinosis. It can damage your muscle. They can also travel to the brain, to the lungs, to your kidneys, and cause these cysts all over the place. So you don't want trichinosis. When in doubt, cook your meat very well to get rid of all of these parasites, tapeworms, flukes, all this stuff. Cook it. What temperature do you need to cook your pork to? You need to cook your pork to 160 for pork. And a lot of these meat thermometers, if you have them, will tell you the different temperatures for pork, chicken, beef. They all have different ranges where you know that you have safely killed off those parasites, because nobody wants this stuff. It's nasty. Speaking of nasty, I think pinworms are by far the nastiest. Why are they the nastiest? Let me show you why they are nasty. I've lost my picture. I'm going to go back to sharing. Let me go back. Share my picture. Okay. So trichinella. Here's my picture about trichinella, and I was telling you about it, that you can get it from undercooked pork. We don't usually have this problem in the United States, but trichinosis, cysts you can find in the muscle. That's what this is. These are cysts in the skeletal muscle that can also get lodged in the brain, in the lungs, in the kidneys. And again, cook it to the proper temperature, whether it's pork, chicken, beef, cook your meat so you don't get these parasites. Pinworms are, to me, in all of this list of nastiness and parasites, I think these are the grossest because they're so common. They don't cause a lot of illness, which is good because they are very common because they kind of go unnoticed. But nearly 1 in 3, 30% of kids in the US have pinworm infections. 1 in 3 kids have had pinworms at some point. So pinworms are going to live in the intestines, like we talked about all these other guys living in the intestines. And then the female comes and she will deposit her fertilized eggs outside the anus every night. So every night I removed the other pictures in here that showed them out there, but they will crawl out and lay their eggs and then go back in. Super gross. I personally think it is really nasty. So that's my thing. I think the pinworms are the grossest one in this lecture, but you may have a different opinion about which worm you find is the nastiest. But again, these guys are really common in the US, especially in kids, and then up to 16% of adults could have a pinworm infection and not even notice it. But if you see kids scratching their behinds, they may want to have that checked out because it could be pinworms. Filarial worms have some of the most horrifying pictures. If you Google elephantiasis, and you will see some sites you don't want to see. How do you get a filarial worm infection? These are going to have insects as hosts. So it's either going to be a mosquito. Mosquitoes get the bad rap for almost everything. But it could be a mosquito, a bite from a mosquito, or a bite from a black fly can pass these things. And these are filarial worms. They're very small. So they're going to get passed from the bite of a fly when it takes a blood meal or the mosquito. And then it's going to go through all the different stages. We can have 2 different types of adults, again, male and female. They will meet up and they, will produce these little microfilariae. And then these things are going to be spread around the body, and it can manifest in all different places. It can cause river blindness, like here. Heartworms are in this category. Hopefully, if we were talking about pets, hopefully you're also getting your monthly heartworm treatment for your dog and your cat. If your cat goes outside, also needs it too. So don't forget your 4-legged friends about heartworms because it will attack your pets. And then the last one listed here, elephantiasis. So the filarial worms can often in countries, these are really untreated diseases, elephantiasis. Somebody is bit when they're younger by a mosquito. They have no idea that this mosquito was the one that had filarial worms in it. They get bit, and those filarial worms are spreading and spreading and spreading, and they cause damage to the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system's job is to take the fluid away and get rid of your swelling that happens all the time on the daily. You are putting fluid out into your interstitial spaces, and your lymphatic system takes that fluid away, and then it's going to dump it back into the bloodstream. But if you've got elephantiasis, those stupid filarial worms, the most common one is going to be Wucheria, blanket on its species, but they will block up the lymphatic ducts and they cause damage and scarring. And then these tissues are going to swell, and some of them will scar up and blister, and it causes swelling in all different places around the body. Some of the times it's the legs, other times it's around the genitals, all on the hands. You never know what's going to get damaged. And as it goes and continues on, it gets worse and worse and worse in these if it remains untreated. So this is elephantiasis. It is absolutely treatable if you catch it early and seek treatment. It's when it's left for a long, long time that it manifests, and you can see these devastating elephantiasis pictures if you ever Google elephantiasis. It is a filaria worm that causes this. The last phylum in here, so all of those are nematodes, roundworms, and all of them had a cuticle, longitudinal muscles that make them wiggle. Some of these guys are free living, some of these guys are parasitic. Know your different examples. You will definitely have questions about the different examples. Hookworms, whipworms, hookworms, pinworms, filaria worms, ascaris, all of those, you might have a question comparing all of those different ones or asking about a specific one. So know those guys. The last thing we want to talk about today, tardigrades. Tardigrades are also called water bears because they kind of look like a bear, just with an extra set of legs. We're going to see these in different environments. So we can find them on land, we can find them in the water, freshwater, saltwater, all over the place. What's super cool is that these guys are going to have a complex nervous system. They're mostly herbivores. Some of them are predators and will eat other organisms. The coolest thing about water bears is that they can go into a cryptobiotic state. If conditions are bad, they just dry and shrivel up. And then it's like, God, what did they advertise those things for? What were they? What did they call them? I can't remember. I think they called them circus bunnies, but really they were like brine shrimp. These guys do that. These things will desiccate down from 85% water to 3% water. They just dry up into a husk. And so they'll go down to 3% water. And then if conditions get better, poof, they'll come back out. They can reproduce with sexual or asexual. They can undergo parthenogenesis. They can withstand massive doses of radiation. They can go up into space. They can live in all sorts of crazy places and just come back out swinging. So there's a very short video here about them, but this is what they look like. They kind of look like cranky bear face with their cute little paws come down, their little claws. These are water bears, or tardigrades. I don't think anybody has picked a tardigrade for their research paper, but you could if you still haven't picked anything. Again, they can withstand all sorts of extremes: radiation, crazy pressure or lack thereof, up in space. They can desiccate down to 3% water, and extreme temperatures. Extreme temperatures, clearly up in space, is super cold. So all sorts of things you can throw at these guys and they still come back out. So water bear don't care. These are tardigrades. So that is the last of this group. There are other phylums in Ecdysozoans, but I want you to know the nematodes are the roundworms, tardigrades are the water bears. Know that water bears are super resistant. They're just resilient little organisms. And then know the different things about the roundworms that we talked about. If you have questions, let me know.